Morning. Everyone has coffee, I hope. I'll have water. Recently, I've been traveling over the last couple of years, lecturing with a 75-year-old Polish guru of design, and he always starts our lecture by saying, "I am here to teach you very important design principles, and Matt is here to entertain you." And so I hope that at least you'll find this entertaining. This talk might be called Professional Amateur. I was thinking about it last night. I had a teacher when I was an industrial design student at RISD, where I've been teaching for the last 8 years, who told me that in order to be a good, maybe great industrial designer, you had to become a professional amateur. You had to be able to jump deeply into somebody's world, learn everything there is to know about some tiny esoteric thing, product, system, or something, and be able to get out and do that again in the next week in someone else's world. And this story really starts in 2004, when teaching, I was invited by my department head, Mickey Ackerman at the time, to be the faculty lead on a project that was a partnership with Massachusetts General Hospital. And the project was to work for the Department of Defense, actually. And if you can imagine what it's like to sell a DoD project in an art school in New England, you can appreciate where we started. But it was really easy to socialize the idea once we looked at the fact that we were training Army medics. We were going to design and prototype a full-scale, high-fidelity human casualty simulator. So we're talking about a 6'2", 210-pound, bleeding, screaming robot, and lots of them. And so I was the faculty lead on this project, and the reason why was because I had a history of working with sensors and networks and actuators and RFID and all this kind of stuff, teaching physical computing classes, but I didn't know anything about medicine. And one of the things I learned right away was right in 2004, just coincidentally, I lectured at a conference in Vienna, Austria, and Tim Brown from IDEO, most people know who IDEO is, but they're kind of the darling firm of industrial design discipline. And Tim gave the closing plenary speech, and he changed the game for me. He told us all about a story of IDEO working in 2003 at a hospital in Indiana, where they did this in-depth participatory design study. And they pretended to be patients, they interviewed doctors, interviewed nurses, and really changed the way a hospital works from an industrial design perspective. I had heard a little bit about participatory design before, but all of a sudden this was very exciting, and I had to go to the AMED Medical School in Texas and watch these 18-year-olds try to treat each other in combat situations, and it became a completely different thing to get out of the classroom. But you can see I'm very lucky to work with students who are not only very creative and very intelligent, they're also very capable at building things quickly, which is, I think, very different from courses I've taught in some engineering departments and other kinds of schools. These people rapidly create sketch models all the time, so it's a whole other way of being able to communicate with your audience. But the most important thing that I learned, really what this story ends up being about, is that I didn't know how to ask the right questions. I had all these Army Ranger medics, I had doctors at Rhode Island Hospital, and I was asking stupid questions. I was like, well, what's the most important thing if somebody gets shot in the chest? And they'd tell me a little bit, but then it was my responsibility to build a lung. And I didn't know that we don't suck air in through our mouths, that we actually use our chest muscles to increase the size of a vacuum that then pulls air in through our mouths. And if I'm going to design a chest that can have a hole made in it, and then it can be fixed with like a needle decompression, I need to really understand this anatomy. I don't need to be a doctor maybe, but I got to understand something. And so it was during this project that I became an EMT, and it was a great move. And I ended up riding on a rescue in Bristol, Rhode Island, and then I became an EMT cardiac. And it's basic life support, stopping bleeding, splinting, stuff like that, but it really helped a lot to treat some patients and actually do patient assessments especially. And so then I went to paramedic school, which was something that I didn't really understand when I started it. It's a 2-year process. And you study all kinds of things from cardiology to pulmonology to pharmacology. You're responsible for pushing 60 plus very dangerous drugs and doing some pretty serious advanced life support stuff. And I was just trying to become a better industrial designer. And to be honest, it was really way, 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 way too much. It was way more than I needed. It was probably a really big mistake. Right about in the middle of this process, I got engaged, and I found out very quickly that it was a huge mistake. The weekly 24-hour shifts in the emergency department became a very, very sore subject in my house. But I learned a lot. And I joined at the same time the National Disaster Medical System. I was invited by a doctor at Rhode Island Hospital I had gotten to know through simulation to join this federal medical team, get deployed to disasters. Luckily, I haven't been deployed yet. I joined just after Katrina, but we've done a lot of training. Here, we're doing mass casualty assessment training at Westover Air Force Base, and it's actually a running helicopter and hundreds of patients with all different disorders. And one thing I realized here was that there was, and this is, I guess, how the medicine and the design fit together. These are some slides from a test at Rhode Island Hospital. But what I realized was, if you have a mass casualty incident and there's a contaminant, some toxin in the air, firemen go in bravely and well-equipped to drag these patients to a decontamination line, and it can take upwards of hours to get them through decontamination just to be intubated. The most basic life-saving procedures don't even start for an hour. And if you've heard anything about medicine, the golden hour is the time where you save someone's life or you don't. They're either going to live or die in that hour, and if you can't sometimes start an IV, administer some drugs, and at least maintain a patent airway, you've got no chance. So the idea was there's a big social problem here too. Firemen do not want medical care providers in a scene like that. They feel like they'll never be trained properly or have the right equipment. And so it was my challenge, or hypothesis, that maybe we could create the right kind of personal protective equipment just for paramedics to be able to enter a scene like that and just start airways and do some basic stabilization of patients that have inhaled nasty goo. And so you saw in that last little video, these are doctors and nurses at Rhode Island Hospital wearing state-of-the-art equipment. You saw two nurses helping one other nurse become completely entangled in this suit, and it's not even an emergency. This is a completely controlled situation. Here are my students with some volunteers from a local company, North Safety, who really were generous and came in and gave us all kinds of equipment. Here we're at Cranston Fire Department. You can see, you can't even see out of this thing. And this is state-of-the-art stuff. And so luckily, because we had learned all of this medicine stuff, I was able to teach patient assessment. I was able to, here I'm wearing those thick rubber butyl gloves, but trying to start an IV. And the encouraging thing is that you can actually do it. But you can see, so this works great, surprisingly. But now I just stuck my goo-covered fingers right on the site that enters their vein. Bad stuff. We did a whole other project that I don't have time to show you today just about IV starting kits for caustic environments or toxic environments. But this project was focused on a suit development. And I'm going to move along a little bit. I'd love to tell you all about all the different kinds of suits and all that. But you can see we really revised the way that people don the gear especially, and then feel psychologically secure that those seals are working and intact. So seal assurance became a big thing, the click of a wristband or something. So you step into them like bunker gear, fireman's gear, things that they were already familiar with. Suspenders, we learned from some of my sailing gear, because a short person like me puts on even a small, and the crotch is between my knees. So just being able to hike up some suspenders pulls the crotch up, makes a huge difference in fit, and adds almost no material or manufacturing cost. You can see you pull the jacket up, all one piece, the overshoes are connected to the pants, pulls around the side so you can do it with one person. You don't have parts laying on the ground in nasty stuff potentially, it's all one piece. Folds up from on top of itself, clickable wrists. I can't talk about this too much, but this is the first suit that can be adapted to be either level C, which is just like a air filter, a powered air filter, or it can change out a mask, so you can use the same suit, less cost, less training, with a full scuba system like this. And then here's a really 500% sped up video that in real life is about 5 minutes long. These are two people who put on these suits a lot of times. They're my students. This course, when I taught it, was a pilot program between the engineering department at Brown University and the industrial design department at RISD. So I was really lucky to have a group of young people that were half and half engineers and industrial designers. But I think you can get the idea. This guy was able to do it alone. This guy needs help. This is the state-of-the-art suit on the left-hand side. That guy just wrapped fancy, expensive duct tape around his wrist, called chem tape. He has no assurance that he didn't miss a spot. You know, it's not like the clicking wristband or something like that. And how am I doing on time? About halfway there? Just let this finish. Sorry? 5 minutes? Okay. I've got just one more project to show you after this one. It's related. So you get the general idea. Here's Dr. Salem Sunner in the emergency room at Rhode Island Hospital wearing the suit, administering organophosphate, basically treatment, and then intubating a patient, proving that he can see much better, has much greater dexterity and all of these kinds of things. So then I figured I'm not going to ride on a rescue. I didn't study industrial design for all these years and fall in love with all this stuff because I want to work at a fire department. It's an incredible job, an incredible responsibility that I'm just in another life, maybe. But so I wanted to find a way to apply medicine to things that I was interested in at a pace that was realistic, and so I joined the National Ski Patrol. And Dave Hemmendinger is here, who's one of the people who first recruited me. And this past semester, or last spring, I should say, I took a group of students, and with some partnership from some local experts, we thought about the mountain rescue as a problem. And the idea is that, sure, at a place like Yawgoo Valley, that's not even a mountain, it's actually a hole in the ground, in Rhode Island, it doesn't matter. You can get somebody down in 20 minutes, no matter what's wrong with them, basically. If you're doing CPR and you can breathe for them, you can get them into an ALS, or Advanced Life Support Rescue, into a hospital. There's no reason to bring IV bags and everything else up onto the hill. But at Whistler, or a place where it can take many hours to get to the top, several thousand feet, advanced life support, things like IVs, intubation, anything like drugs, anything like that, is only in the parking lot where a rescue can reach, or where you can get to the first aid station, maybe, if it's a really sophisticated mountain. And the top 9/10 of the mountain, you gotta wait hours to get a person to any kind of definitive care. 3+ hours was a really generous estimate for getting somebody from point of injury to definitive care. So we knew that wasn't right. And so the saying is load and go. You take a patient, you bring them to a hospital. The hospital's where they have all the good stuff. They have doctors, they have real drugs. Why bother putting that stuff out in the field? And for years, emergency medical system was treated like they shouldn't be playing medicine. They should be bringing people to the hospital. But if that's true today, then why aren't all ambulances Ferraris? You know, we have advanced life support ambulances. Instead of putting somebody in and going as fast as possible, I start IVs, I do full codes in an ambulance with serious drugs, and we're able to maintain a person for hours. Ideally, you get them to the hospital as fast as possible, but it's not always possible. So that was our premise. We did a lot of research, found out what kinds of injuries there were, and that it was valid. We went to the mountain. This is my student playing patient, and this is really fun. He's pretending to have a tibia-fibula fracture and doing a quick patient assessment. I've got probably 20 students standing around me in the woods. And it's at Yawgoo Valley. This is Charlie Strobel, is the head of the National Ski Patrol there right now. And so we do an assessment on him. I have some of the students do it, backboard him, and students are playing bystanders. And we're doing this very realistically. I'm calling on the radio and everyone's sweating. And so you can see we are able to do this basic life support stuff on a hill that's several hundred feet deep. It still took us a half hour to get him to the bottom. We chatted a little bit, maybe 20 minutes I could have done it if I went as fast as possible with 2 experienced people. I think Dave can probably attest to that. By the time you get there, wrap them up and ship them. So we started developing some concepts. I wish I could show you all of them, and I can't. And we thought about vehicles versus sleds and divided up the stowage around the sides of it. And figured out that things should be broken into 5 categories. I've never seen things stored in these kinds of categories before, and I think one of the biggest innovations we had was how do you partition stuff? How do you put it together? Airway, IV, ortho, wound management, circulation. We have a heated compartment for keeping IV fluids and oxygen warm because that's how people lose fluid or lose temperature really quickly. And I'd love to tell you all about it, but don't have time. So here's some just pictures recently. You can see the drug box is, instead of a big fishing tackle box, is now a wrap that unrolls on the patient's chest. All the ACLS drugs are in there, or cardiac life support drugs. He's starting an IV, which isn't even possible on mountains now. He's got kind of this warmer thermos around the IV bag that he's holding up. And he's also bagging them with while he's already intubated. Oh, sorry. And then one of the rescuers with an electronic thumper to do CPR is able to ride along now and bag the patient or breathe for them. This is something that you can't do. How do you move a person if you have to do CPR on them down a mountain? And this is really the end. And so the lesson of this story, if it has a lesson, is I thought the lesson was that I would become a better designer by studying medicine. And I think that's probably true. From my professional work, a company I work at, and through this teaching, I see that I can do things differently than I probably would have, and I think for the better. But the real lesson for me has been how the medicine part totally changed my life. And this sounds kind of corny, but I really, and I've learned when to ask parents to hold the kid's hand while I'm starting an IV and what kind of parents to make leave the room. And I've listened to, an old guy last week tell me what it was like to have his wife die 10 years earlier than him. Things you don't expect while you're doing medicine. You get really intimately involved with these people. Even in an emergency room where they're there for a couple of hours, I mean, young Navy sailors or, little kids or whoever, and amazing impact when you go home and you think about these individuals. And it's given me a hugely different understanding of my social responsibility and incredible sense of intimacy with strangers. Because I have to go over and put a needle in their vein and talk to them for a while, and in 10 minutes, they put a lot of trust in you as a friend and as a provider. And so the last part is that those are kind of sad stories of medicine, but last Saturday, I had the most amazing experience of my life and got to catch 6 babies and wipe them off and suction their airway, and I think now that maybe it'll even make me a better father in the next couple of years or something. But that's the end of my story. Thank you.